Hi, welcome to another lecture of JS Yatra. In this lecture, we are going to design chat application. The level of this question is hard. So without wasting any time, let's get started. Right. So now let us understand the question first. That is, design a chat application for seamless messaging between users, prioritizing user experience. So the question is stating that we have to create a chat application which allows users to message between them. They can chat between each other, and also we have to look forward for the user experience. So chat application is nothing. You can take examples of WhatsApp, you can take example of Facebook Messenger, you can take example of Telegram. So these were the few examples, and primarily you can focus more on the WhatsApp part because that is exactly what we are going to design today. And we'll be keeping in mind all the functionalities that a WhatsApp basic feature has for the messaging system. So what are the requirements for it? So the application should exhibit the following details. What are the essential functionalities required for the chat application? So what are the basic things that we are expecting from this chat application? The first is that you can send a message. The second is that you can receive a message. And the third is that you can see the whole chat history. So these are the three basic functionalities that we want inside this chat application. So the next question is, does the message reception occur in real time? Yes. So all of the messages that you send or receive happens in the real time only. And most of you have already guessed it, what we will be using to achieve real time communication. But I will be telling that in the later part of the video. So those who are very curious, let me just say a word: WebSockets. Alright, that is it. We'll discuss more about this in the later half of the video when we'll come to the optimizations and the deep dive section. But for now, what we have to do is, before choosing the right tech stack, we have to define the database. What database? How come front end has a database? Trust me, we are going to learn a lot of things new in this particular question, and that is why I selected this, because it is going to expose you to a very different scenarios and different technologies that this chat application needs. So this is not just some basic website like e-commerce where you will be having a website, you have front end, back end, and other stuff, but it has a lot of involvement with database as well on the client. Yes, not on the back end, but on the client. This is very interesting, and we are going to understand what type of database we are going to use and how we can store the data. And we are also going to see how we are going to achieve this real-time reception using WebSockets. I'm not speaking it loud, so you hear it very lightly. Okay, it is WebSockets. Don't tell anyone. We are going to discuss this in the later half of the video. But coming back to the requirements again. So what kind of message formats should be supported? We should enable the text formatting that supports emojis. If time permits, we can explore the possibility of supporting image content as well. So we can talk about sending text and emojis also, but we'll keep emojis aside because let us only focus on the text, because that is our prime basic functionality needed. And that is the only part that you will be able to cover in your system design interview round, because you hardly have 40-45 minutes for a system design round. And I don't think that you will be able to cover every aspect of this chat application, because even WhatsApp took a lot of time to develop to the stage where they are currently. So in 40-45 minutes time, we can make the basic application. We can discuss the basic parts of the application. Basic parts are like send message, receive message, and see the chat history. And for sending messages, it has to be restricted to text for now, because we don't have much time. So moving on to the next question, is there a requirement of the application to function offline? Yes, the application should aim to work offline whenever it is feasible. Outgoing message should be cached and sent while the application reconnects to the internet, while the user should have the ability to browse messages even when offline. So we should have this offline feature, and whenever there is a possibility, then this offline feature should come into the play, and we will really understand how this local database of the client is going to help us in achieving this offline functionality as well. So does the chat application include group conversation? No, only we are going to focus upon the one-on-one chats. All right, so we have discussed about the question, we have got the requirements, and now it is the time for us to have the architecture diagram. So let me tell you what are the various components that we are going to have, and let me also full screen so that you can see it clearly. All right. So what we are having right now is the architecture diagram. This is what you are seeing on the screen. It is having two major components, like it is going like this. The two major directions, one is the client, one is the server. So front end, back end, two aspects. Front end, back end, two aspects. You should already have them in the big blocks. So front end is nothing. That is not our part to focus on. Back end is somewhere it will serve the APIs, it will receive the commands, and it will serve the data to us. That is all it has to do. Coming to the major part, that is the client. So on the client, we have the client as the whole collection of UI plus logic plus database. So if you sum up all of these, that is going to become the whole client. So client is not just the part you see on the browser, but client is also the part which is working behind the scenes on the browser. It is interacting with the database as well, hitting all the APIs and the logics and controllers and other stuff as well. So in the client, we are having majorly three sections. One is the UI. UI is the part which is actually visible to the user. Then you have the controller. This is the brain of the whole chat application that is responsible of transferring data from the database to the chat, to the UI. All right. So the controller aims at having a seamless experience, seamless data flow across the application. This is the role of the controller. And you might have already noticed up till now that whichever be the question, we are always having one controller. So having a controller is a must. That is one learning we have found so far across all the previous questions. So controller is a must thing to have. Then moving on to the controller, we have a data synchronizer. So this is a completely new thing that we are touching right now, and I'll explain you in depth. But think of data synchronizer as a part that is dealing with databases and is responsible also for the offline behavior as well. It is also responsible for the real-time behavior, the real-time messages sending and incoming. It is also responsible for querying the database. It is also responsible, not querying the database, just that it has a certain part where it has to access database and it has to run some task. Okay, I'll not go in data synchronizer in depth right now because it will require a lot of deep explanation. So I'll come back to this part later in this video. But for now, if you want to understand what data synchronizer is, data synchronizer helps us to synchronize the data in the database that we have on the client. So it makes sure that the database is up to date, and all of the data that is being present in the database is being accurately used in the UI. So what controller does is controller also performs. This controller is responsible for fetching a data from database as well and querying as well. So this is the overall architecture diagram, and this is the component definition that we are having. So the UI is having the two elements, that is the chat list and active conversation. So chat list is this part and active conversation is this part. Chat list is the part where it is having list of all chats with every user. So when you open WhatsApp, let's suppose you are opening WhatsApp on browser, you have already opened it. So on the left hand side of the screen, you see all the messages that you have with different users, and on the right major part, around 80% of the screen, is where you are seeing the active conversation. So active conversation is the place where you are having list of all messages with a specific user, and there is an input box below that allows you to type a message and send it. So this is the UI part. And coming to the controller, so controller manages the data flow within the applications by retrieving data from the database to display it in the UI and writing data to the database. So controller, what it does, three tasks. First task is to manage the data flow across the application. So whatever data it has fetched from the database, now it is the job of the controller to provide this data to the UI so that it can be rendered by the UI component. The second part is to fetch data from the database. The third part is to write data to the database. So these are the three main functionalities of the controller. Now let us discuss deep what a data synchronizer is. So let me read it out for you, and then I'll explain you what this data synchronizer is and what role it will play in this whole chat application. So data synchronizer is the module that encompasses the database and handles outgoing messages, receives updates from the server, and updates the database accordingly. It has two parts. One is a database that is going to store the information. One is a scheduler that oversees the outgoing messages, orchestrates their scheduling for the sending, and handles the management of their status. Then there is servers that is serving all of the data from the backend. So now let us discuss what this data synchronizer is and what it is doing. And before discussing data synchronizer, let us discuss why was there is a need of having this database and synchronizer, and why can't we we just hit the backend API, get the response and show it. Why is there need of this database and synchronizer? Why can't we just hit the backend API in the first place and fetch the data like any other normal website? So let me tell you one thing. In this chat application, our requirement was that we should also be prioritizing the user experience as well. Now, if you are going with the approach where you are not having any database, you are having a architecture just like any normal website. You are having a front end, you are having a back end, and front end hits API to back end and it receives data and it shows this. And this can be done in a certain way as well if you are using long polling or short polling. I'll tell you about these concepts in depth, but let me tell you the disadvantages of this approach for the chat applications. Now understand that you are a user, you are using WhatsApp, okay, and you send a message, okay, you send a message hey to someone. Now this particular message hey should go to backend, right? And then backend has to confirm that this message was received by the other user, okay, and whether it was delivered by other user, or whether it was seen by other user, or whether there was a case of failure. Now here we actually have to wait for the response of the backend. All right, so let's suppose you send a message to the backend and backend doesn't respond in time. Then your front-end UI will actually be stuck, right? You are waiting for a response to get resolved, and then after that you will decide what to do. So you send a message on the backend and backend is not responding. So what is the state that you are going to put this message for? Is it delivered? Is it sent? Is it failure? Because you cannot pre-decide. If you look at WhatsApp, if it is a sent, it is a sent. If it is a delivered, it is a delivered. If it is a failure message, then it is a failure message. So if you remember the poll widget question that we discussed in the first place, there was one optimization technique that we used to do. I'll take you to that thing, to the section, and let us discuss what we discussed over there. So this was the component definition. This was the deep diving, and yeah, optimistic updates. So if you have watched the first video, we talked about optimistic update, that you let's suppose, talking about the poll widget only, that if someone polls on something, they directly show this updated UI already, that okay, if you have polled it for option B, then option B will be marked as voted, and will not wait for backend API to confirm that whether this request was successful or a failure. So this is okay for polling widget, because let's say even if your poll was not successful, all you have to do was to roll back your vote count. That is it, and that is acceptable as well to some extent. But for message, this is not accurate, and this is not acceptable. Imagine you are a user and you are sending message, and by default you are showing a status of sent. So how does WhatsApp maintains all those UI structures of various states of the message? So if there is single gray tick, that means that it was sent from your side. If it is a double gray tick, then it means that it was delivered, and it is a double gray tick with a blue mark, then it is a seen, right? If there is a failure, then there is a red exclamation mark saying it was a failure. Or if it is in a sending state, you show a little clock type icon there, right? It is not a completely tick, but it's a clock type icon. Okay, it is in sending state, right? So we can't do an optimistic update like this. So also we cannot show this message in a sending state forever. So if the backend is not responding us back with anything, we will not keep waiting for backend to respond well, and we'll change the status from sending to sent or something. This is not very much possible, and this is also resource extensive as well. imagine that for every message you are sending, you are making a network call, HTTPS network call, that too. When HTTPS network calls are, hectic. Remember, you are having a chat between two friends and you have made 100 conversations. So you'll be making 100 network calls on the browser. So this is really madness. Okay, this is really madness. So HTTP calls are very, resource extensive. They'll consume a lot of resources. Once there is an open communication, then it has to get resolved. Then it is taking a lot of bandwidth of the browser as well, and it is very heavy. So remember, you are sending one message, then what, you are making a network call and we are waiting for a response. It was a success, failure, or what is happening with this. So this is not the best way to have it. Okay, so that is why we'll be using WebSockets for it. And when using WebSockets, we will also have to have a database. Now let me tell you how database is going to come into the picture in this question, and what are we going to make the best out of it. So imagine the scenario. All right, so you are having a database, and instead of sending a network call, what you are telling, that is, you are having a database. All right, this is a database that you are having. The moment you you type some message and you hit enter, instead of sending this message to the backend directly, what you are doing is you are having a database on your client side. Okay, by client I mean that on your browser, on your machine in which you are using this WhatsApp or this chat application. So on the client only you are having this database. So whenever you type a message, you hit enter, that message is going to be stored in the database. What the status would be, what the database structure would look like, we will discuss in this whole database structure. But for now, let us understand the basic things, what this database is going to do and what is the role of this scheduler over here. So you understood one part, that when you send message, it gets stored in the database with some special status. The status can be pending. Okay, for example, I mark the status of this message in the database as pending. Now there is a scheduler which is actively looking into this database for the messages with status pending. Okay, once this scheduler finds, okay, there was an entry inserted in the database and it also has a status of pending, which means that I have to now notify the backend, okay, a message was being inserted inside this application, and what we have to do is I have to send this message. I have to notify the backend, okay, hey backend, a new message was being sent from this user. Why don't you take it and tell me what is the final response? So scheduler picks the data with status pending from the database. It sends the data to the server via WebSockets. So it is not making any HTTPS protocols. Okay, it is not making any HTTPS or HTTP request. It is making a WebSocket WS request. I'll tell you what WS is in detail when we're discussing the deep type section. So now you are able to connect all the dots over here. So chat UI, from chat UI, you are sending the message. It is being stored in the database by the help of controller. So controller is taking the data. It is writing in the database. Now with the status of pending, now the scheduler is picking up that information. Okay, the status is pending. It is sending that data to the server with a WebSocket. So see, we are not making any network call. Okay, WebSocket always makes sure that there is an open connection between backend and the frontend always, and it is very lightweight as well. So you are not making any network call again and again. It's just that one open communication between frontend and backend, and in that open channel only you are having all the data transfer. All right, now comes the next part. After receiving the response, the server responds back on the same WebSocket channel with a new updated status of the message. It can be sent, it can be delivered, it can be seen, it can be failed as well. Now it is a task of this data synchronizer to take this data and update the database with the relevant status. So it gets the data from the server. Now it is task of the synchronizer to update the data accordingly in the database, so that now this controller can update the UI. All right. So let's suppose the server sends responses back that, okay, whatever messages was pending from your side, it is being marked as delivered, for example. So this data synchronizer will update the database, or the controller will update the database. What it will do is it will update the database with status as delivered, and once it is done, the controller will update the UI and mark that message as delivered with double checks. So see, this is all very much organized, and with what is the major advantage of having database is that even if you refresh your application, whatever was the current state of this application, that is going to be retained inside the database. So we can ensure that the order of the messages, the manner in which they will send, the timestamp is going to be perfectly maintained, because we are having a perfect database, localized version of it. And once that website is running, we can update this database, and this database will act as a source of truth for us. So like, this was all about this architecture diagram. And even if you are having little doubts about data synchronizer, scheduler and database, your doubts will get cleared after we discuss the database structure and when we move on to the APIs. All right, so even if you're having little bit doubt, it is okay. It is okay to have the doubts. Those doubts will get resolved when you have a deep understanding of database structure and the APIs as well. Now let us move further to the database structure that we are having. Okay, so this is the database structure of the whole application. Database is what? Database is a place where we can create tables as well. So what you are seeing, these columns, these are various tables, except for these two. These are just enums values that I have shown you over here. You can ignore these two for now, but these are the 5 major tables that we are going to have inside our application. The first table is the user table. It is having an ID, it is having a username. Okay, so this is a date table going to store information about the user. User can be either a sender or the receiver. Okay, they can be either of it. Next table we have is the message table. Inside this message table, what we are having is the ID, message ID, when it was sent. So sent at is a timestamp at which the message was sent. Chat ID. Okay, so chat ID is a foreign key over here, and this key is coming from ID of the chat table. So chat table is what? Chat table is nothing, just a table having the sender ID, the receiver ID. These two IDs are nothing, just a foreign key of the user table. Okay, I have already told that this user table can contain sender ID or the receiver ID. So let's suppose there is a communication between two user X and user Y. So this message entry is belonging to which a set of conversation with set of chat is being identified by this chat table. So if user X is the sender and user Y is the receiver, then the sender ID will have X, receiver ID will have Y, and there is some ID. Now if I use this ID over here, then it is telling that whatever message which I send, let's say it was hi, then it is belonging to user X and Y. Okay, this is what this chat table is conveying. So if there is an ongoing conversation between two users, that can be tracked in this chat table, and this chat table is a way where we can also link a particular message. In this message table, what we can do is we can identify, okay, this particular message is between user X and user Y only, and what is the status of this message. Status of this message can be either of these 4. So this status is specific to the UI. So it can be in a sending state, it can be in a send state, it can be marked as delivered, it can be marked as failed. All right, these are the 4 status, and these status we also see in the WhatsApp also. So if it is in a sending state, you see that small clock icon. If it is a sent, then it is a single gray tick mark. It is a delivered, then double tick mark again with gray color. And there is also one read scene as well. That case we are not considering right now, although you can add it. It is up to you. You can write it over here as read. Okay, you can have this read status as well. And there is a failure. So if the message was not sent successfully, you can show some error message or something. And this is all specific to the UI. So these are the values this status can store, and the content. So whatever message you typed in the input box, that is being stored in this message. Now there is a label for draft as well. So draft is what? Draft is what? Let's suppose you type something and you exited the application, you pressed back or something. So it is going to again create an ID, again a chat ID to identify between who two users this conversation is between and what was the content. The status is not necessary because it is again marked as draft message. So it is not ideal to, have this message having any status. Next is this sent message request table, and this is the very crucial one. Okay, understand it very carefully. So you remember I was talking about the part where the scheduler is reading data from the database and it is like picking the values as pending and it is sending to the server. So that scheduler is actually picking up the values from the sent message request. Send message request is a middleman, a kind of a place between sending the message and actually rendering that status on the UI. Okay, so this plays a very important role and it is a middleman. So whenever you are sending any message, typing anything and hitting enter, the controller is making entries in the two tables. One is obviously in the message table with status as sending. Okay, and it is also making entry in the sent message request table with status as pending. Okay, so sent message request is the table which the scheduler is going to read. The scheduler is going to read the content from this table, and if it finds that okay, if there was any row with status as pending, then it is my job to notify the backend about this new message. So whenever you are entering any message, hitting the send button, the controller is making entries in the two tables. First is the message table with the status as sending, and second is the sent message request table with the status as pending. And what are the other things we are having? You are having the message ID. Okay, message ID is so message ID is a foreign key coming from the message table. Okay, then you are having the status, you are having a last sent, and you are having a fail count. So notice that we are not storing the content in this sent message request. It is only containing a reference of the message as an ID. It is a foreign key coming from the message table, and it is having a ID of it itself. Then it is having the status of this request. Okay, you can call this status, you can call it as the status of request as well. Then you can have a timestamp of when this message was last updated, or when was the last time we have seen update from the backend. And if there was a failure case, then we have to at least make 3 or 4 retries. Okay, so this fail count is containing a count of the number of retries we have made. We can make 1 retry, 2 retry, and 3 retry. After we have reached a threshold, then we can finally show that okay, I have tried so many times, this message was actually a failure, so I can go ahead and update the status as failed right now. So backend can fail the request 1 time, 2 time, 3 time. So for the first time and the second time, we are not going to show any UI update on the backend, on the front end, sorry. So it is a threshold event. When we are crossing the threshold, let's suppose I have a number of retries as 3 is the maximum retry I can perform. So when I have performed 3 retries of sending a message, and now I am sure that okay, I have already done 3 retries, now I cannot retry it anymore. It is better to update the UI as fail, and that is how we convey that okay, the message got failed, and you have to you have to send the message again or do something else. So for first and the second case, we are not going to update the UI. We are only going to update UI when we retried for the third time, and in the third retry also it got failed. All right, so I will be discussing these 3 status: pending, in flight, and fail in depth once we discuss about all the APIs and how the database is going to interact with the controller. So I hope you got this. Let me quickly summarize. You are having a user table that is going to store data about the sender and the receiver. Then you have a message that is going to store the message content, and also it is having a foreign key from the chat table. that is conveying us that this message is for which sender and which receiver. And it is also having a status that is UI specific. It can be sending, sent, delivered, failed, or read. And you are having a draft table to store the drafts. And again, a sent message request table that is going to store a foreign key of message ID. And this is responsible for updating the status of the message from the backend. Okay. So these were all the structures that we are going to need to make this application. This was a whole database structure. Now let us move to the APIs and let us see that how the backend is going to interact with the controller and with the server as well. All right, now we are on the very interesting part of this solution, that is the APIs. So APIs, APIs in this section, what we are going to discuss is that how the message table, how the database is going to be treated when the data is being sent to the server, or if the data is coming from the server, because the major stuff happening in this application is primarily on the database. So it is very crucial to address the behavior of this database when there are various scenarios happening. Like scenarios, what scenarios? Scenarios like sending a message, when you ensuring synchronization of outgoing message, when there is a data from the server, right? And there are many cases that we are going to discuss right now. Okay, so now let us understand the case when we are sending a message. Okay, so whenever you are typing something and hitting the enter, so what exactly is going to take place inside the whole application? All right, so when you are hitting enter, the controller is going to get aware. Okay, you have written something and you have hit enter. Now it is a task of the controller to insert a new row inside the message table indicating the sending status. So where is this message table? So whenever you are hitting enter, first entry you are going to make is inside this message table, and what the status is going to be? Status is going to be the sending. All right, this is the first thing that is going to happen. Now again, include a new entry inside the sent message request table with a pending status. So while you have made one entry inside the message, you have to make another entry inside the sent message table, and the message ID is going to be copied as a foreign key from the message table for the same content, and the status right now is going to be pending. Okay, these are the two things that we did so far. Okay, then what is next? So now the conversation UI fetches the information from the message table and presents the new message with the indicator that signifies it is being sent. So after you have made entries, now the conversation UI, okay, this conversation UI is where? So this is the conversation UI, active conversation UI. Okay, this active conversation UI is going to what? Is going to fetch the information from the message table, not from the send message table. Be careful, it is going to fetch data from the message table because it is the place where it is containing the status relevant to the UI, and it is also containing the content as well. So, and it represents the new message with an indicator that signifies the message is sent. Okay, indicator can be that clock icon that we see on the WhatsApp. We can use the same over here as well. And the next part is eliminate any draft records linked to the ongoing conversation. So in the ongoing conversation, if there was any draft message, okay, that has to be discarded because it is not making any sense, because draft message is something you want to send to some user when you are texting them after some time, but you have already texted them something before, and if there is any draft message, that has to be discarded. Okay, you don't have to take anything there. So what we are going to do, we are going to empty the draft table for this particular chat ID between user X and user Y. Now currently there are no further synchronous tasks to be executed. We are done for that. So now it is the responsibility of the data synchronizer to synchronize this pending message with the server that lies with the scheduler. So now this part is done. Okay, one part of sending the message is done. Now comes the very interesting part about scheduler and how it is going to schedule the things for us. So ensuring synchronization of outgoing messages. The responsibility of synchronizing outgoing messages with the server lies with the scheduler. Okay, we have already discussed that there is a scheduler component over here. It is a task of the scheduler to synchronize this database with the server. So the responsibility of the synchronizing outgoing message with the server lies with the scheduler. Okay, now it is a task of the scheduler to sync the database table with the server. It will manage its own task queue. It will create a queue of its own where the scheduler is going to push a task in this queue and it is going to execute them. And it is also going to monitor the send message request table that we have already discussed, and I have been saying this for quite a long time in this video that this scheduler is going to monitor the send message request table. So how it is going to monitor and what action it has to perform when it will encounter various type of status that we have seen inside the database diagram. So let's suppose it is seeing a status of pending inside the send message request table. What it is going to do? It is going to add a task in the queue. So the moment it encounters a pending state, it is going to add a task in the queue. So a queue is what? A queue is a array where it is going to push some task and it is going to execute first thing first. Okay, it is a FIFO structure, first in first out. Okay, so first task will get priority and it will be executed as soon as it is pushed. So it will add a task to the queue for sending the message to the server through the real-time channel, update the status of the corresponding row to indicate that it is in flight. So once it has encountered a pending state, it is going to add a task. The task is what? Task will be a function that is going to interact with the WebSocket and that is going to send a message to the WebSocket. Okay, task is a function that is going to send a message to the server via WebSocket. So this is a task. This task is being pushed in a queue, and once the scheduler has pushed the task in the queue, it is going to update the status of the data as in flight. Okay, so after it was pending, it was changed to in flight after the scheduler has pushed the task into the queue. Okay, this is the thing. In flight means that, okay, the scheduler has done his job. Now the request is in flight, like it is in the air right now. Okay, I have sent the request to the server via the WebSocket. The request is in the air, it is in a flight. Now I have to wait when the confirmation comes and then I'll update the data accordingly. This is the thing. So this is the pending status and this is what scheduler is going to do. It is going to pick the data as from pending. It is going to push a task in the queue and it is going to simultaneously update the status as in flight. This much it has to do as a scheduler. Now once the data is in flight status, then what we are going to do? So we are going to discuss over here. So we perform a check on the last sent at timestamp. If the duration exceeds the defined timeout threshold, update the status of the corresponding row to fail and increment the fail count by 1. So once the data is in a in-flight status, a countdown begins. Okay, let's say it is a 5 seconds countdown. Okay, the moment now the scheduler is going to wait for 5 seconds and it is going to check whether the status of this particular message with status in flight is going to be updated or not, whether I received any confirmation from backend about this message or not. So if I exceed 5 seconds, okay, if I exceeds 5 seconds, then my backend server failed to update me about this message, then I am going to mark it as a first fail attempt and I am going to update the fail count by 1. Now again I am going to wait for 5 seconds. If the backend again doesn't sends me any update from their side, I am going to mark this second try as a fail attempt again and I am going to update the count by 2. But this scheduler is not going to update anything on the UI because there is still one retry left. Now after 5 seconds again, I see that the backend doesn't send me anything. Okay, it doesn't send me anything. Then I will mark this retry as a fail, and again I'll update a fail count by 1. Now I notice that I have reached the threshold of the fail count. It is 3. Now it is the task of the scheduler to update the UI, and it will update the status of the task as fail now. Okay, it hasn't updated the status from in flight to fail directly in the first 2 attempts. After the 3rd attempt, it is going to update the data as fail, and it will let us discuss what we are going to have in the scenario of failure. So add a task to the queue for retrying the transmission of this message at a later time. The duration of the delay is determined by fail count. Employing an exponential backup retry strategy, the delay duration will progressively increase in an exponential manner of the fail count. So again, when the task has been marked as fail, now we are not going to retry it again and again. We are going to add this task for retrying again at a very later time of the application. Okay, it is now I have retried as much as I wanted. Now I will not retry it again and again. I will push a task for retrying the transmission after some time, but I will mark this message as fail right now, and I will leave this up to the user. If he manually triggers a retry, I will execute it from the task queue. Otherwise, let it be in the task queue, and if the relevant time comes, I will make a final retry call and see if it is working or not. So this is about the failure scenarios. So this was all about sending a message from your side. What if a message is coming from a server to your machine? And that is a very interesting scenario we are going to discuss. So the data synchronizer will actively receive real-time updates from the server, that we already know. Data synchronizer is the place where we are having the WebSockets, and WebSockets will receive real-time updates from the server. That is presented as events. Each event encapsulates a type and a payload. So there has to be an event name. Let's suppose message sent, a message, incoming message, delivered message, and all those stuffs. And the structure and the content of the payload are contingent upon the specific event that is being transmitted. So we are not going to be discussing about the payload. We will be just focusing about the event and what are the actions that are going to be triggered when a particular event is being fired from the WebSocket server. So let's suppose the WebSocket server, the server sends us a message failed event from their end. Okay, a message was failed. So let me read this out for you. Modify the row pertaining to this message in the send message request table by updating its status to indicate failure and increment the fail count by 1. So this was a part where we were discussing above for the fail scenarios. So if a message failed request come, what I am going to do is I am going to update the table in the send message request indicating a failure, and I am going to increase the fail count by 1. I am not going to update the status directly to fail. I'll wait for the retries, and after the retries are done, I am going to update the status as fail. Please note that at this stage, we do not update the status of the row in a message table to fail. Okay, we are not going to update the message of a status to fail in the message UI. The message is not considered failed until we have made attempts to retry sending it. So message table is for the part that is being rendered in the UI. Okay, if we talk about this particular table, we remember, right? We are not going to update this message as failure, because if we update it as failed directly, it will be reflected in the UI. That is not what we want. What we want to do is we are having this message request, and in this we can update the status as fail over here after the retries are done. And after the retries are happening, so let's suppose a message failure come, we can update this as fail, and we can increase the fail count. But we will not update the status in the message table. That is what I wanted to highlight over here. Okay, don't get confused that if the failure count comes and we do not update the fail status here also. No, we are going to update the state as fail over here after the server sends us the message fail event. But we are not going to update the status as fail over here, because that is going to be reflected. We are going to update the fail over here after the retries are completed. Okay, this was about send message failed, and then we update the UI. The next part is the message sent event. So message sent event is what? It is very simple case. We modify the status of the message to indicate the message has been sent. Delete the row associated with this message in the send message request table. The message has been successfully received by the server and is no longer in the pending or in flight state. So when we received a confirmation from the backend, okay, finally a message was sent, I can update that status of the message in the message table so that the UI can get updated first. Then I will delete the row from the sent message table, because once the message is sent, now I don't want my scheduler to pick this message up. Okay, it was all pending before. It moved to in-flight, and from in-flight it was successfully sent to the user. Now I don't need this message inside a send message request table, because this message was already sent. Now my scheduler is free. Okay, I don't have to worry about this message anymore, because the message was already sent to the user. Now we can delete this row from the send message request table, and the scheduler can move on to some another row and to execute some another task. Now we update the UI. Now there was a confirmation that message delivered. So message delivered is very, very simple. Modify. So message delivered will happen only after the message was sent. So in message sent, we already deleted the row from the send message request. So when the message deliver will happen, what we will do is we will modify the status of the message to indicate that the message has been delivered. So we will directly update the message table with the status delivered, and we will update the UI. Very straightforward. Now there is an incoming message. Now a message is coming from from the sender to you. You are the receiver now, and someone is sending you the message. Then how we are going to tackle that in your application? It is very simple. Add the new message to the message table. First thing, when message is coming, you create an entry in the message table, and you introduce a new role in chat table if does not exist before. So if there is a new user, then it is a new sender, it is a new receiver, and that information is not present in the chat table for you. Okay, so you will create a new entry. If there is already an entry, then you can leave that. Okay, there is no need. So but if there is no entry, then you create a new entry in the chat table. Now after that, you introduce a new row in the user table for such sender if it does not exist, and then you update the UI. This is very much simple, because when the message is incoming, that is coming from someone else. You don't have to add any scheduler work over here. You just have to add that data in the message. You get the timestamp, you create the roles in the chat table and the user table, and you are done, and you can render that thing on the UI. This is very straightforward and very simple. And trust me, if you talk about all these things in details, that too in your interview, the interviewer is going to be highly impressed by your conviction, by your thought process, because the trickiest part explaining in this chat application is this table and the functionalities this table is going to behave. This is a very important system design part over here. Now once you have convinced the interviewer with all your work with database, the architecture diagram, the requirements and everything, now you can definitely talk about the optimization. And this is the favorite part. I know you were waiting for this thing, this part. This is very interesting. We are going to learn about client side storage. We are going to learn about what are the various ways we can do the real-time updates, and what are the two other implementations. Okay, so let us first of all think of determining the choice of the client side storage. So we have heavily discussed that we are going to need some storage space where we are going to store the data, and we are going to need a lot of space, because there can be a lot of chat between a user. You will not be needing at least 3-4 MB or 5 MB. You need more than that space. You need, maybe the chat can go up to GBs as well, gigabytes as well, and you might need some place to store images also, right? You need to store URLs, heavy emojis and other stuffs. So we definitely need a good amount of storage. And also there is one more requirement, that even if the user closes the browser and he shuts down his system and he reopens again, that database should also persist. So these are the two requirements that we need from the database. We are expecting these two items from the database. First is what? We need a good storage. Second is what? We need the data to persist even after the system is down, system is closed down and system is restarted. Okay, and we need a common source of truth for the system. All right, So keeping this in mind, what are the various type of choices we have? So start like this, okay? You don't directly jump to using and saying, okay, we will be using IndexedDB and we will not be using cookie, session and login. You also have to explain the user why not you are using, why you are not using, what are the limitations of cookies, what are the limitations of session storage, local storage, and why you are using IndexedDB. Okay, this is very important thing to talk about. Trust me, you learn this concept once and you can learn execute this concept across various system design questions. All right, that is what this JS Yatra is all about, and this is why I have created this course. I have picked up questions, I have explained topics with the help of that question, how they are fitting to that question, and once you understand these concepts, then you can apply these concepts on any question, right, when the situation fits according to the need. So we are going to heavily discuss what are cookies, what are session storage, what are local storage, and what is IndexedDB, and what are the differences between all these four, and why finally we are using IndexedDB. And this is going to be very interesting. So to understand what are these things and what are the differences between these things, I have a link to a blog that has explained it very well. So let us come down to the first thing, that is the local storage. Then we are going to discuss session storage. Then we are going to discuss cookies. All right. So I think we should discuss cookies first, then come to session storage, and then come to local storage. We should not directly jump to the best thing out of these three. Okay. So we should first come to cookies. So cookies, first of all, we can see that they are taking a size up to 4 KB, which is very, very less. We cannot use cookies as to store data because it is very less in size. It is having only 4 KBs, and we need a good amount of storage. That is the first thing we saw about cookies. And what is a cookie? So cookie stores the data that has been sent back to the server with subsequent XHR request. It has an expiration date as well. So cookies are also going to expire in some time. Even if we outshadow this storing limit, let's suppose we are using this cookies, but the cookies tend to expire. Okay, not today, but in some time in future they are going to expire. So this is hampering our second use case, that we want the data to persist. So cookies are not satisfying these two things. So what is problem with cookies? Cookies, first of all, they are the data that needs to be sent back to the server. Okay, that is something we don't want with the request. We want cookies, like we want the data that can be only sent when needed, otherwise it does not send. Okay, that is one thing. Again, second thing is that it has having a expiration date, and the third thing is that it is having a size of 4 KB, which is very, very less. So this is, cookies are not the ideal case for us. Coming to the next part, session storage. Session storage has a decent limit, 510 MB. Okay. We have solved one thing related to storage, but again it still feels less. 510 MB in today's world is very less. Okay, it is nothing. So storage limit has increased with session storage, but it has not reached a limit where we can consider session storage as our database. Let us understand what else it is providing. It stores data only for a session. Maintaining that data is stored until the browser is closed. So the problem with session storage is that it is going to be immediately destroyed when we close the browser or tab. That is something we do not want. Okay, we do not want the data to get lost when we close the browser, because the second time the user comes to the application, we have to reload all of the data from the database. So session storage is also not going to work for us. Why? Because again, space issues, and it is not going to persist when the browser or the system is closed. So this is also not suitable for us. Next comes the local storage. So local storage is a way to store data on client's computer. You can store in form of key value pair, and the storage limit is 5 MB. Okay, it is not having an expiration date, although the storage is 5 MB, but the expiration date is not there. So at least we can store the data forever. Okay, and the data is also not transferred to the server. Okay, but it is not very secure. It has a limited to string data, so you have to transform that data. So let's suppose you are having a key like this, and the value is in a form of string. Now when you are reading the data from local storage, you have to first of all do a json.parse, and you have to convert that data to a particular JSON and then read it. That is one extra thing that we have to do, and I don't like doing this. So what else? So we have discussed local storage, we have discussed session storage, we have discussed cookies. So cookies was the problem because the size, and again it has an expiration date. Session storage, it has a good size, but again it is going to destroy the session after its closing. Local storage, it is going to keep data forever, but again the size is very small and it is very insecure, and the data is stored in form of strings. So these three are not matching our cases. Then comes the IndexedDB. All right. So we can talk about IndexedDB over here. So first of all, let us understand what is a IndexedDB, and then we are going to discuss how much we can store in that data. So I'll give you a very small overview of IndexedDB. So IndexedDB is a large scale NoSQL storage system. It helps you store just about anything in the user's browser. In addition to usual search, get, push action, IndexedDB also supports transactions. Here is the definition of IndexedDB on MDN. So IndexedDB is a low-level API for client-side storage of significant amount of structured data, including files, blobs. This API uses indexes to enable high-performance search of this data. While DOM storage is useful for storing a small amount of data, it is useful for storing large amount of data of structured data. IndexedDB provides a solution for this. So what we have seen previously, the DOM storages. So you can call local storage, session storage, and cookies as DOM storages, and they are useful for storing a small amount of data. But for storing very large amount of data, what you can do is you can use a IndexedDB. It is a NoSQL system, but you will get functionalities like you can do a get search, you can do a put actions, you can do search, you can also perform transactions. So if you have like worked on Node.js and you have written you have worked with MongoDB or other stuff, then there are transactions in the backend systems. Okay, transaction is what, like you are making a bulk update, okay, in a table, and you are creating a transaction for it. And let's suppose if one transaction gets failed, then the whole bulk update will get rolled back and nothing will be added in a transaction. So transaction is like fallback safety, that if any error comes in inserting any one database, we will roll back everything. So this is a transaction. So it is a proper database. It is a NoSQL database, and it is a proper database. Okay, and it will help you provide all the functionalities like searching, filtering, put, get actions, and other stuffs. And in this part, you can check that how you if the browser is supporting index window, how you can open a connection, and then how you can create an object store. You can create a database promise. You can define primary keys, like we have discussed, like there are foreign keys, primary keys. So you can create primary keys over here. You can define indexes, and you can get database, open transaction, open object, perform operations, and other stuffs. But the main part is, if we move on to the second link over here, how much can you store? Okay, how much can I store? So ideally, Chrome allows the browser to store up to the 80% of the total space. Right now, this is the updated data. You can store about 80% in the disk, and an origin can use up to 16% of the disk. You can use Store Manager API to determine the maximum quota available. In incognito mode, this gets to 5%, and then for Internet Explorer, you can use up to 250 MB, and it will ask the user for permission if you are going beyond 10 MB. All right, and then there is Safari, allow up to 1 GB, and then you have to ask permission if you are going above 2 MB or more. So see, this is the good amount of data that we can store. Okay, this is exactly what we wanted. Now let's suppose if I deal with images, I deal with videos, I need a good amount of storage to store these videos and images, And this is where this IndexedDB will come into the play heavily, because we can store files and blobs as well. So this was why, how, and what for cookies, session storage, local storage, and IndexedDB. I hope you get it. And yeah, and we will be using IndexedDB. Why? Because data persists after we close the browser, more space to store the data, and features of the NoSQL. Now comes the interesting part, that is the real-time updates. So we talked about that we'll be opening a WebSocket connection already. I have discussed that, but how did we landed on WebSockets, and was there any approach which we discarded before? Yes, there was. There were two approaches that we discarded before landing upon the WebSockets. The first approach was short polling, the second approach was long polling, and then the third final approach which we used was the WebSockets. So let us understand them here in brief about what these polling techniques are and when and why we should use them. So short polling is a technique where the client make request to the server. Okay, client is what? Our chat application. Server is the backend. We make a request to the server. Now server can respond in two ways. It can send an empty response, or it sends the data. As soon as the client receives the response from the server, it will wait for a couple of seconds and repeat the above process. So think about this short polling as a fetch call. You know fetch call in JavaScript. Fetch, await, fetch, you pass the URL. So assume that fetch call wrapped inside a set timeout of interval, let's say 3 seconds. And that fetch is happening again and again and again on the server, and we are performing a short polling. So we make a request and then we wait for the response, and then if we get response, if we do not get response, then we update the UI accordingly. And there is no guarantee here that which request will be served before. Let's suppose you are having an interval of 1 second, and the first API took about 5 seconds to respond, but the second request responded immediately. So on the UI, you will show that the response on the second interval first, and after 5 seconds, the response of the first data will come back, and then I show the data. So this is the short polling technique, and this is not much advisable because you cannot maintain the order over here, because ordering is very important of messages. You are sending one message here and you are seeing that you are seeing some other message after 10 seconds, and the order is messed up. Then this is not user friendly experience. This is not the right approach for our system design question. We can read this also, some challenges. Make repeated requests to the server, waste resources as each new incoming connection must be established. The HTTP headers must be passed, a query for new data must be formed, and a response. So again, in short polling, you are consuming a loss of resources on front end and as well as on the back end, because after every 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, you are hitting the backend API, and that too by just one person. Imagine if there are 100 millions of users using it. So imagine the load on the server. Okay, this is very bad approach. Then there comes a slightly better approach, which is the long polling. So long polling works differently from short polling in the following way. Client makes a request to the server. Okay, now the server can respond in two ways. If it has some data available, it can respond right away. If it does not have any new data, it will keep the connection open for a period of time, and when it receives new data, it will respond back with the updated data. So in short polling, the server was bound to respond immediately, whether it was empty data or it was with some data. But with long polling, what we are happening is, if the server is having some data, you send me immediately. But if you are not having any data, then server will wait. It will keep the connection open for some amount of time, not for some amount of time, but for maximum amount of time possible. And it will try to see, okay, if between this time I get some new data. If I get some new data, I will send it to the user. So in short, it is a mechanism where client continuously asks the server for new information using regular HTTP request, and the server stalls its answer when it has nothing to report. Okay, this is very much similar to short polling, just that if the server is not having any response, it is not responding with empty data. It is keeping the connection. Okay, I will keep the connection open. Now I will respond back when I feel like responding, and I will send you the data if there is some data or the connection times out. There can be two scenarios: either the connection timed out, or there was some data eventually after some time, and the server sends you the data. This is a long polling. But again, here in short polling and long polling, both we are using HTTP protocols. Okay, you can see that in request in the network tabs. So some challenges of long polling. So message ordering and delivery guarantee. Again, this is the issue that we discussed with short polling as well, that guarantee, the message guarantee is not over here as well. If the client was not able to receive the message, then there will be possible message loss as well. And there is performance issues again, and device supports and fallbacks. So these are some challenges with long polling again, because again, polling methods are always resource extensive. Then comes the best approach, which I wanted to talk about, was the WebSockets. So WebSocket is a computer communication protocol that provides full duplex communication channel over single TCP connection. Duplex means two ways. Okay. So it is a WebSocket protocol, enables interaction between client and web server with less overheads, providing real-time data. Okay. This is the word that we were looking for from the server. WebSockets keep the connection open, allowing the message to be passed back and forth between the client and the server. In this way, two-way ongoing conversation can take place between client and the server. So WebSocket, we keep one connection open forever, and that is not a HTTPS connection. That is a WebSocket connection, or in short, we call this as WS protocol. Okay, and in this, what we are having is we are having a two-way communication. It is not like once you send the data, you are waiting for server to respond back immediately or after some time. Your job is to send the data, and whenever the backend feels like responding, it will respond it. You don't have to wait for the response from the data. Okay, this is the beauty of WebSocket connection. You send the data, and in return, you're not expecting anything immediately or even after some time. The backend will respond with some data when there is some real-time update. It is a duty of the front end to receive the data and update accordingly. So here what we are having is there is no wait time. Okay, there is no waiting mechanism. I send the data, now I will receive, I will listen for any kind of update. It can be an update for a data that was sent 10 requests ago, or it can be an update for the immediate data that you have sent just now. Okay, so WebSockets keep a unique connection open while eliminating latency problems. That is one good thing. Long polling is much more resource intensive on the servers, whereas WebSockets have extremely lightweight footprint on the servers. WebSockets pass through most firewalls without any reconfiguration, and it has a good security model as well, origin-based security. So you can define who can make a WebSocket connection to your backend by whitelisting your front end. Okay, it has a good security model as well. So this was the differences between long polling, short polling, and WebSockets. What are the scenarios it does, and what are the differences, and which one is the best? So we discussed about short polling, long polling, WebSockets. And you can also, we will be also deep diving about WebSockets. You can read this article. It is a very good article about WebSockets. And the one thing I wanted to show you over here was that once the WebSocket connection is established, all right. So one thing I wanted to show you about here was that, let's suppose you are dealing with normal APIs. Your APIs start with HTTP. But with WebSocket, it starts with WS, which states that it is a altogether a different kind of protocol connection, and that is why it is a lightweight as well. So by default, HTTP protocols are very heavy, and WebSocket protocols are very easy and lightweight. So that is one thing I wanted to show you, and we can read this part as well. WebSocket URLs use WS scheme, and there is also WSS for WebSocket connections, which is equivalent to HTTPS. All right. So WebSockets are completely different type of connection protocols, and they are not same as HTTP, and it is a two-way communication. Okay, so you can keep sending messages from one side, and it can keep sending responses from other side. So two flow data is always there, and it is not like I send data, I have to wait back, and then I send another data. It is not like that. It is always two-way connection. So this is the case over here, and we will be using WebSockets. Why? Because it has a less latency than long pole. It always keeps the connections open. It is a modern way of building application, and it is a less resource intensive. Coming to the last 2 points of the optimizations, this we have already discussed so many times, and it has come always and always in every system design question, and I think you are already familiar with it if you have watched the previous 3 videos where I have discussed in depth about the lazy loading and virtualization. Okay, so I will just read it out for you. Implement lazy loading for the components that are not required during the initial load, such as emojis, popovers, or modals. So this is the lazy loading technique. We have discussed that in the previous videos where we will talk about lazy loading, suspense, right? And how we can, import a module on need before, already loading it. And you can, what are the various components that you can like lazy load over here are emoji pickers, popovers, or modals. Okay, then utilize windowing or virtualization techniques to handle lengthy list of messages in a conversation efficiently. Let's suppose there is a conversation between 2 users and you are having 10,000 messages. Okay, so will you render 10,000 div elements on your screens, right? No, you will not, right? Obviously, if you are watching this system design now, you obviously know that you won't be rendering 10,000 div items on the DOM, because it will make your UI very janky and it will lag a lot. What you can do is you can use virtualization over here, and you can, you can only render the part which is in the viewport, and you can free up your browser memory if it is exceeding the viewport heights. Okay, height or width, whatever. So but you have to definitely use virtualization so that your browser is not overfilled with a lot of data, and the UI doesn't get janky. All right, so with this we finished off the very interesting the chat application system design question. The level of this question was hard, but again it might have felt kind of medium to you because we have already practiced 3 questions before landing onto this chat application. The only differentiator was the client-side database and the WebSockets and the database structure schemas, but rest of the optimization techniques still remains the same. And this is what I wanted for you, that you learn one concept in a particular question, and then after learning that concept, you are capable enough of applying that concept across various system design questions. And this is what I aimed in this JS Yatra course. I hope you liked this particular lecture. This was all in this lecture. See you in the next one.